Test, test, 1, 2, 3. Shabbat Shalom. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Test, test, 1, 2, 3. Okay, sounds good. Take my headphone out. All right, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Something of a gray and drizzly morning here in Sag Harbor. So if you are in the area, it's probably a good morning to get cozy, a cup of tea. You know, at least you guys can do that. I gotta come to work. But I hope that you're having a good morning. And I hope that you're ready to celebrate Shabbat alongside with me. And we'll begin our service. 1 second, page 182 if memory serves. Close, 186. 186. We can join together, page 186, as we begin our service with thanks and gratitude. Modeh ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam. Modeh ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam. Modeh ani lefanecha. Modeh ani lefanecha. Melchai v'kayam shechazarta bi nishmati b'chemla rabba emunatecha. Let's turn to page 192, Ma Tovu. Ma Tovu Alecha Yaakov Mishkenotecha Israel. Ma Tovu Alecha Yaakov Mishkenotecha Israel. What am I going to do when you go to Florida? What am I going to do when you go to Florida? Like, can I get a big poster of you right here? I can put a, is that an NYU hat? What hat is Monmouth? Which one is that one? That hat. That's a.
Oh, that's Amherst.
Amherst.
The Monmouth.
Huh. Mamish. We should change it to Mamish.
From every school.
I like that one the best, though. I think it looks good on you. Very good. All right. We're on page 194, blessing for our bodies. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher yatzar et ha'adam b'chokhmah, u'bara vo nekavim nekavim, chalulim chalulim. Galui v'yadua lifnei chisech vodecha, she'im yipatech echad mehem, o yisatem echad mehem, yefshar lehitkayem v'la'amod lefanecha. Baruch atah Adonai rofech chol basar, u'mafli lasot. Turn to page 196, a prayer for our souls. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi. 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 My God, the soul you have given me is pure. You created it, you shaped it, you breathed it into me, and you protect it within me. For as long as my soul is within me, I offer thanks to you, Adonai, my God and God of my ancestors, source of all creation, sovereign of all souls. Praised are you, Adonai, in whose hand is every living soul and the breath of humankind. Baruch atah Adonai, asher bi'ado nefesh kol chai, beruach kol b'sar ish. Arise of body or spirit as we turn to page 198. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lasach b'bina labchin meyovel laila. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam bokeach ivrim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zokef kefufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam rokar etz al hamayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamechin mitzadei gaver. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam nalbish harumim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hanoten le'aev koach. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamavir shinam einai utruma me'afapai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasani b'tzelem Elohim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasani ben chorin. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasani Israel. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ozer Israel bigura. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam oter Israel b'tifarah. Okay, please be seated. We're on page 205. We'll read the top reading at the very, very top of the page. We seekers of God, how do we find you? In good deeds and in the study of Torah. In your search for us, you find us in the bending of the knee, in the rigor of study, in the honesty of commerce, through a good heart, through decency, in respect, true fellowship, companionship, and love. Through truth and peace, and the no that is really no, and the yes that is really yes. Baruch atah Adonai hamelamed Torah le'amo Yisrael. Okay, be seated. All right, if Marty's coming, do you want to turn your phone on that way just in case, you got, okay. I was going to say, just so that, because I know especially today it's really gross out there and slippery, so I don't want to take any chances. Okay, we're on page 206. Elu devarim she'en lahem shiur she'adam ochel perotehem ba'olam hazeh v'akeren kayemet lo le'olam haba ve'elu hen kibud avayim ugmilut chasadim ve'hashkamat beit hamidrash shacharit ve'aravit ve'achnasat orchim uvikur cholim ve'achnasat kala l'vayat hamet v'yun tefillah Ve'havat shalom min adam la'chavero ve'talmud Torah keneged kulam. We rise in body or spirit for the opening blessing of Pezukei Zimra on page 212. Baruch she'amar ve'haya ha'olam baruch hu Baruch oseh ve'reshit Baruch Omer ve'Yosef, Baruch Ozer u'Mekayem, Baruch Merachem al haaretz, Baruch Merachem al habriot, Baruch Meshalem sachar tov l're'av, Baruch Chalad ve'Kayam lanetzach, Baruch Podeh u'Matzil, Baruch Shemo. Bishvachot u'bizmirot negadelcha, u'nshabechecha nefeircha v'nazkir shimcha v'namlichecha, Malkeinu Eloheinu, Yachid Chei Olamim, Melech Meshubach u'Mefuar Deyad Shemo Agadol, Baruch atah Adonai, Melech Mehulal Batishbachot. Please be seated. We're now on page 214. Tov lehodol Adonai. Tov lehodol Adonai, ulezamer leshimcha elyon. Tov lehodol Adonai, lehagid baboker chastecha, lehagid baboker chastecha, ve'emunatcha ba'leilon, ve'emunatcha ba'leilon, tov lehodol Adonai, alei asur v'alei navel, alei gayon bechinor, כי שימחתני אדוני בפועלך, במעשה ידיך רנן. מה גדלו מעשיך ים, מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך. מה גדלו מעשיך ים, מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך. מה גדלו מעשיך ים, מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך. אשרי יושבי ביתך, עוד יהללוך, עוד יהללוך. אשרי יושבי ביתך, עוד יהללוך, עוד יהללוך. Selah. Can you silently ask Rahab? ואנחנו נברך ים, מעתה ועד עולם, מעתה ועד עולם, מעתה ועד עולם. הללויה, 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 hallelujah. Psalm 150, page 218. Hallelujah, 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 el bekocho. Hallelujah, birkia uzo. Hallelujah, bigvurotav. Hallelujah, kerov kulo. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah. בתקע שופר, הללוהו בנבל וכינור, הללוהו בתוף ומחול, הללוהו במינים ועוגב, הללוהו, 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 hallelujah, 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 betziatzalei shama, hallelujah, betziatzalei trua, kol anshama tehalleliyah, hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Nishmat kol echai tevarech et shimcha Adonai Eloheinu. Can you say silently for us? Have you hand? Good? All right. Baruch haba, Morty. It's great to see you.
Nice
Yeah.
to see you.
I don't know what all of this is, so just be mindful of whatever it might be. They must be having a...
It's a band concert tonight here.
Oh, no kidding.
I'm coming.
Oh, that's so nice.
Are you playing?
Uh-huh. tummy drum, maybe. That's about it. The only instrument. It's funny for whatever my singing ability. I've quit more instruments than I have fingers. So.
Well, it's not too late.
That's why I'd like to think that, Morty. I think that's a good thing, But I want to try to see with Eva and Emmett. Hopefully, we can get them started a little earlier. It'd be nice. Like a piano, I feel like is a good thing because once you learn piano, you can learn almost anything.
Start with the keyboard.
Yeah.
Mort played the piano good.
No kidding.
Well,
Yeah, you are a multi-talented family. I gotta say.
played piano, Finnegan, Zibitsiki, or
Wow.
I tried. I went back, but never my thing.
Well, you're better with the sewing, It's a good skill set to have, All right, we're on page 220. Ilu finu male shira kayam ulshonenu rina kamon galav vesiv totenu shevach kemarcheve rakia vehinenu mehirot kashemesh vechayareach Veyadenu frusot ken hishrei shamayim Veraglenu kalot kayalot Ein anachnu maspikim lehodot lecha Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu. We continue silently. We're on page 222, middle paragraph. Here, you want me to move those? I can move that stuff in. Okay. Shochenad maharom mekadosh shemo vechatul ranenu tzadikim badonai la yesharim na'ava tehillah Befi sharim titala udibrei tzadikim tit barach uvilshon chasidim tit romamu bekerev kedoshim tit kadash uvma kehalot rivevot amcha be'ed Yisrael berina yitbar Shimcha malkeinu bechol dor Vador yababai yababai bye 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 Yababai yababai bye 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 Yababai bye 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 Ay bye bye. We'll rise now in body or spirit as we turn to page 223 for the concluding blessing of Pazugani Zimra and remain standing through the Chatzi Kaddish and the Baruch. Yishtabach shimecha alad malkeinu ha'el ha'melech ha'gadol v'ha'kadosh b'shamayim u'va'aretz Ki lecha na'e Adonai Eloheinu Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu Shiru shvachal v'zimra v'zumemshala ha'netzach Gedula u'furat ilah v'tiferet kedusha u'malchut Brachot ve'hodaot me'ata ve'ad olam Baruch atah Adonai Melech gadol v'tishbachot El ha'hodaot Adonai niflaot Habocher b'shirei zimra Melech el Chei ha'olamim Yitkadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah Be'al ha'divrach yirtei v'yamlich malchutei B'chaychon v'yamechon v'chayhei d'chol Beit Yisrael B'hagala v'izman karim V'yimeru Amen Yeshmei Rabbah mevarach Le'alam le'almei almayav Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitbar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh V'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal Shemei dekucha brichu Le'elaha min kol birchata v'shirata Tishbechata v'nechemata Damiran me'ama V'yimeru Amen Baruchu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Leolam Vahed. Okay, please be seated. We're on page 228. We'll read together in English at the bottom of the page, and then 3 lines in Hebrew just above. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, creator of light and darkness, who makes peace and fashions all things. In mercy you illumine the world and those who live upon it. In your goodness you daily renew creation. How numerous are your works, Adonai, in wisdom you form them all, filling the earth with your creatures. Be praised, Adonai, our God, for the excellent work of your hands, and for the lights you created, may they glorify you. Shine a new light upon Zion, that we all may swiftly merit its radiance. Praised are you, Adonai, creator of all heavenly lights. Or Chadash al Tzion Ta'ir. Or Chadash al Tzion Ta'ir. V'nizkechu lanu mehera le'orom. V'nizkechu lanu mehera le'orom. Yadadai dai bim bim bam, yadadai dai bim bam, yadadai dai bim bim bam, yadadai dai dai. Yadadai dai bim bim bam, yadadai dai bim bam, yadadai dai bim bim bam, yadadai dai dai. Baruch atah Adonai yotzer hameorot. We're now on page 230. We'll begin reading in English at the top of the page and then the Hebrew at the bottom. How deeply you have loved us, Adonai our God, gracing us with surpassing compassion. On account of our forebears whose trust led you to teach them the laws of life, be gracious to us, teaching us as well. O merciful one, have mercy on us by making us able to understand and discern, to heed, learn, and teach, and lovingly to observe, perform, and fulfill all that is in your Torah. V'ha'erinenu b'toratecha v'dabek libeinu b'mitzvotecha v'yachel levabeinu le'ahava u'lira et shemecha v'lo nevosh v'lo nikalim v'lo nikashem le'olam va'ed ki v'shem kodshecha agadol v'hanora batachnu nagila v'nismecha b'yeshuatecha v'havienu le'shalom me'arba kanfot haaretz v'tolichenu kol b'miut le'artzeinu ki el poel yeshuot ata uvanu v'charta v'kerabtanu le'shimcha hagadol selah be'emet leodot lecha yechedcha b'ahava baruch atah Adonai habocher b'amo Yisrael b'ahava. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Now on page 234. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha v'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol meodecha ve'hayu advarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavcha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha b'veitecha u'lechtecha b'derech u'shofbecha u'kumecha u'shartam leot ayadecha v'hayu letotafot bein einecha u'chtavtam al mezuzot beitecha u'vihi she'arecha. We're now page 236. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe lemor dahaver b'nei Yisrael v'amarta lehem v'asu lahem tzitzit al kanfei bigdehem ledorotam lenatnu al tzitzit al kanaf b'til techelet והיה לכם לציצית, וריתם אותו, וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני, ועשיתם אותם, ולא תטורו אחרי לבבכם מאחרי עיניכם, אשר אתם זונים אחריהם, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם אלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם, amen. All right, we'll turn to page 238, 4 lines up from the bottom in Hebrew. Tehilot le'elyon baruch hu mevorach Moshe u'Miriam u'bnei Yisrael lechanu shira besimcha rabba ve'amru chulam mi chamocha ma'elim Adonai mi kamocha nedar v'kodesh nora teilot osef lem ay la 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 shira chadasha shibchu gehulim לשמחה שפת הים יחד כולם הודו והמליכו והאמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד צור ישראל ומה בעזרת ישראל ופדך יומך יהודה בישראל גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו קדוש ישראל ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל. We'll begin the Amidah together on page 242 and then continue silently. Please go at your own pace, and when you're finished you may be seated. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Okay, if you're still davening, please go at your own pace, catch up with us. And if you're finished, you can join us on page 324, repetition of the Amidah beginning at the very top of the page. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el HaGadol HaGibor v'Hanora El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim V'Koneh HaKol V'Socher Chasdei Avot v'Imahot U'Mevii Geula Livnei B'neihem L'man Shemo B'Yahava Melech Ozer u'Moshiach u'Magen Baruch atah Adonai Magen Avraham Ve'ezrat Sarah Atah Gibor le'olam Adonai V'chayei metim ata Rav le'Hoshia Mashiv haruach u'marid haGashem Mechakel chayim b'chesed V'chayei metim b'rachamim rabim Somech noflim v'rofech cholim Umatir asurim umekayem emunato lishenei afar michamocha bal gevurot umido mehelach melech memit umechayem umahatzmiach Yeshua v'nemanat al chayot metim Baruch atah Adonai mechayei hametim. Page 326. נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשממרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה על זה ואמר, קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, נלך כל הארץ כבודו. Adir, Adirenu, Adonai, Adonenu, Madir, Shimecha bechol haaretz. Baruch kevod Adonai mimkomo. Echad hu Eloheinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Umashiachenu vehu Yashmienu, Berachamav le'nei kol chai. Ani Adonai Elohechem, Yimloch Adonai le'olam, Elohai Tzion ledor vador. Hallelujah. Ledor vador, ledor vador, ledor vador nagid God lecha, ledor vador. Ledor vador nagid God lecha, ulenetzach netzachim kedushatcha nakdish, kedushatcha nakdish, v'shivchacha Eloheinu mipinu lo yamush, le'olam le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Ahel HaKadosh. All right, please be seated. We're on page 329. Yismechu v'malechutecha shomrei 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 Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Yismechu v'malechutecha shomrei 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 Shabbat korei oneg Shabbat. Mekadshei mekadshei shvi Shabbat. Kulam yismeu v'yitangu mituvecha Shabbat. Yismechu v'malechutecha shomrei 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 Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. V'ashvi ratzita bo v'kidashto Shabbat. Tremnat yamim Oto kerata Shabbat. Yismechu v'malechutecha shomrei 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 Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Zecher lemase bereshit Shabbat. Zecher lemase Maaseh Bereishit Shabbat Yismechu V'malechutecha Shomrei 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 Shabbat V'korei Oneg Shabbat Eloheinu, Eloi Avotenu, Imotenu, Ritzei, Ritzei, V'imnuchateinu, Kahadeshenu, B'mitzvotecha, V'ten chelkeinu, B'toratecha, Zahabeinu, Mituvecha, V'samechenu, Mishuatecha, V'taher libeinu, Le'ovdecha be'emet ve'hanchileinu Adonai Eloheinu Aylayna Aylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylaylay la la la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. B'Ahav Ratzon Shabbat Kodechecha V'Nuchuva Yisrael Mekadshe Shemecha Baruch Atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat. Okay, we'll turn now to page 330. And one day, however, we're going to do it in Hebrew. One day, one of these days. No, I love the nusach of it. Actually, I just have to practice it a little bit so I know it. On this Shabbat day, as you graciously receive our prayers, help us to hear your call. Grant us enough health to fulfill our duties and the compassion we need to attend to others. Teach us humility that we may perceive our own faults, and grant us the wisdom to be forgiving of others. Give us the courage to be true to our highest selves and the charity to see the best in those around us. Give us patience enough not to become discouraged, hope enough to overcome all fears for the future, and faith enough to know your presence. O source of blessing, look with favor upon us. May our offerings be acceptable to you. Baruch atah Adonai she'otcha levatcha b'yirat navud. Turn now to page 332, beginning at the very bottom of the page. We'll read together in English. For the expanding grandeur of creation, worlds known and unknown, galaxies beyond galaxies filling us with awe and challenging our imaginations, modim anachnu lach. For this fragile planet Earth, its times and tides, its sunsets and seasons, modim anachnu lach. For the joy of human life, its wonders and surprises, its hopes and achievements, modim anachnu lach. For human community, our common past and future hope, our oneness transcending all separation, our capacity to work for peace and justice in the midst of hostility and oppression, modim anachnu lach. For high hopes and noble causes, for faith without fanaticism, for understanding of views not shared, modim anachnu lach. For all who have labored and suffered for a fairer world, who have lived so that others might live in dignity and freedom, modim anachnu lach. For human liberties and sacred rights, for opportunities to change and grow, to affirm and choose, modim anachnu lach. We pray that we may live not by our fears, but by our hopes, not by our words, but by our deeds. Baruch atah Adonai hatov shibcha l'chanai lehodot. Page 334, Sim Shalom. Sim Shalom tova uvracha chen v'chesed berachamim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael hamecha barcheinu yotzreinu kulanu kechad ve'or panecha ki ve'or panecha natata lanu Adonai Eloheinu. Sim shalom tova uvracha chen v'chesed berachamim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael hamecha Torah chaim ve'ahavat chesed u'tzedaka uvracha berachamim nechaim ve'shalom. Sim shalom tova uvracha chen v'chesed berachamim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael hamecha baruch atah Adonai Amarech Amo Yisrael V'Shalom. Let's read together on the top of page 337. Prayer is not purely an act. All things pray and all things pour forth their souls. The heavens pray, the earth prays, every creature and every living thing. In all life there is longing. Creation is itself but a longing, a kind of prayer to the Almighty. What are the clouds, the rising and the setting of the sun, the soft radiance of the moon, the gentleness of the night? What are the flashes of the human mind and the storms of the human heart? They are all prayers, the wordless outpouring of boundless longing for God. O se shalom bimromav, uyase shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. Yase shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Yase shalom, shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Good Shabbos, everybody. Right. So this morning we read from Parshat Vayigash, which is the second to last parsha of the book of Breshit, the book of Genesis. And we've reached, again, with a story with very many, I don't know, you're probably all more learned than I am in the world of opera and plays and things like that. But what do you call it? There's a climax at the end, but what do you call the other things in the middle of the story that also feel like climaxes? Right? Because you have all these things that sort of build up to these big moments, right? And is there a name for this? All right, we'll dwell on this question and this thought. But what I mean by that is to say, right, in the various acts and chapters of the story of Joseph and his brothers, it seems like every week there is another big moment, big reveal, big something. And so sure enough, this is the big reveal. This is the moment where after all of the Mishigas, Joseph finally reveals himself to his brothers, and it's rather an emotional conversation. So what I want to talk about, though, is something odd. I increasingly, as I look more very carefully at individual psukim, or individual sentences, and noting things as the commentators did, right? What seems odd, or what seems at least needing in further explanation. So we get a sort of strange circumstance, right? Let's maybe just read a little bit so we have a sense of where we are. If you're in the Plat Chumash, it's page 287, and the women's commentary, the parsha begins on 261. 287 in the Plat. So it says right now, Judah approaches Joseph and says, "By your leave, my Lord, please give your servant a hearing, and do not let your anger flare up at your servant, for you are like Pharaoh. My Lord asked his servants, 'Do you have a father or a brother?' And we said to my Lord, 'We have an aged father and a young boy of his old age, whose full brother is dead. He alone was left of his mother.'" This is Rachel's son, right, referring to Benjamin. "And so his father loves him all the more so. You then said to your servants, 'Bring him down here to me, and let me lay my eyes on him.'" Right. So this is going back to last week's parsha, where Joseph wants to see his brother Benjamin, because Benjamin, was a tot, was very dear to him. Also, really his biological brother. And so in the end, right, he sort of constructs this whole thing where he wants them to bring Benjamin down. "But we said to my Lord, 'The lad cannot leave his father. If he leaves his father, he will die.' You then said to your servants, 'If your youngest brother doesn't come down with you, you'll never see my face again.' And so when we went up to your servant, my father, we related to him my Lord's words. And when our father said, 'Go back and buy us a bit of food,' we said, 'We can't go down. Only if our youngest brother is with us will we go down, for we won't be allowed to see the man's face unless our youngest brother is with us.' Your servant, my father, then said to us, 'You know that of the two my wife bore me, one is gone from my side,'" referring to Joseph. "And I said, 'Surely he's been ripped to shreds. I haven't seen him to this day. If you take this one too from me, and some calamity befalls him, you will lower my gray head in woe to Sheol." So this is again a sort of euphemistic phrase that the Torah uses, right? It's it's not a good thing, right? It's the end of his existence. Okay, now here's where it gets sort of strange. "And now, if I go to your servant my father, and the lad whose whole being is bound up in his is not with us, and he sees that the lad is not there, he will die, and your servants will have lowered your servant's our father's gray head in anguish to Sheol." In other words, If we do what you say, our father will die, right, and it will be a disaster. For your servant made himself responsible for the lad to my father, saying, if I don't bring him back to you, I will stand guilty before my father for all time. So now please let your servant remain as my lord's slave in place of the lad, and let the lad go home with his brothers. So in other words, Judah says, I'll stay here as the hostage, right? Let Benjamin go back, with his brothers. For how can I come home to my father without the lad and thus see the harm my father will suffer? Okay, so all of this is sort of the known. Now we're going to get to the reveal part, and something that struck me as sort of odd. So Joseph, we are told, can no longer restrain himself before all who are standing in attendance of him, and he basically sends everybody out, right? Send them all away from me, so that no one else was in the room except for Joseph and his brothers. He gave voice to a loud wail, and the Egyptians heard. Pharaoh's palace heard. Right? In other words, he was, that again, very dramatic moment, right? He cried so deeply and so loud that it could be heard throughout the land. Right? It's hyperbolic, but it speaks to the moment. And Joseph then said to his brothers, Ani Yosef, I am Joseph. And now here's the part that's strange. He says, is my father alive? Now here, they put in parentheses the word really. Okay, but the text doesn't say that. The Hebrew text says, okay, Yosef od avichai, right? Ha'od avichai. Is my father still alive? Zehu. That's all it says. Okay, but his brothers were unable to answer him, and they recoiled in fear of him. Okay, so now, just anticipating, what do you think my question is? What do you think struck me as odd about this? Okay, have this whole conversation, Joseph and his brothers, all about his father, right? Reveals himself to his brothers, and then what does he ask? Forget again this translation. He says, is my father alive? Right? So why is he asking a question that he should already know the answer to? Okay, and the text actually, if you go back and count it, Judah in his speech, his preamble, mentions his father being alive 14 times. 14 times. So why then is Joseph asking whether his father is alive if Judah has just spent this whole time talking about how in fact his father is alive, and if they don't bring his brother back, then he will die? Okay, so does it strike you guys as odd, or am I the only one here in the room that's confused? Okay, the question just basically becomes, what is the point of the question, right? If he knows the answer already, why is he asking it? So interestingly enough, the classical commentators don't spend a lot of time considering it. It must not be, of interest to them. However, there is one person, the Kli Yakar, who is a much later source, who does ask the same question and posits a very interesting answer. So to get to that answer, I'm going to read a little bit from, you guys, since you grew up in the conservative, right? Walter Herzberg, sound familiar, that name at all? So, like when you were using the Chumash when you were growing up, right, it had a commentary in it. Probably was the Hertz Chumash, right? Yeah, so it's not Herzberg Hertz, but he is one of the professors at JTS and was one of the people who wrote some of the commentary and all of that. So he talks about this, and he gives the following kind of instruction. He said, Judah's words had more than the intended effect, so much so that Joseph could not control himself any longer. He weeps aloud, and finally, after withholding his identity from his brothers, he shockingly reveals himself to them after a 22-year separation with the words, I am Joseph, is my father still alive? Okay, this is his conclusion. Okay, so Joseph's question, upon careful analysis, is doubly puzzling. First, why does Joseph ask if his father is still alive, if Judah clearly mentioned that Jacob was indeed alive, having employed the word avi, father, 14 times? And second, even more baffling, perhaps, why does Joseph say, is my father still alive, and not our father? Boker Tov Sue. It's great to see you. Good Shabbos. You're just in time. You're just in time. And actually, you're our expert. Well, I'm going to ask this question from the beginning. In opera, right, or in the theater, right, there is a climax of the story. But what happens when there are other climaxes in the middle of the story? Are they given a different designation? Is there some other terminology where it feels like we've reached the apex of the story, and then it turns out actually there's another act? Is there something that designates that? Is there something?
Scene 2.
Scene 2.
It's
Just good writing. Just good writing. Okay, that's all it is. So it's just good writing.
Thank you.
Maybe we need to create a new terminology for this. But anyway, so here we are in these two questions, right? Why does he ask if his father's alive?
So Judah is one of the sons.
Judah is the eldest son. So, right, the reason we're Jews.
It's hard to go back and forth between.
I know. That's actually, the truth is that this story in particular would be very helpful to have kind of a summary alongside of it, because then you get all of the stuff. But the reason why we are referred to as Yehudim, as Jews, is because of Judah and the tribe of Judah and the location that Judah ultimately takes in Israel when they end up in the land, which is Judah and Benjamin, their lands basically are where Yerushalayim is and where the temple is. So in the end, and then when the two kingdoms split in half, one is called Israel and the other one is called Judah. And Israel is destroyed first, and then Judah is destroyed second, and then exiled, and then it comes back. But through actually really we have the Romans to thank largely, probably the Greeks and the Romans, as that became our designation, probably as a pejorative, but in the end, that's us.
So wait a second.
Mhm.
Judah and Benjamin walked in for 40 years?
No. All of the wanderings, right? This is the end of the book of Genesis,
Genesis.
and this is the end of the one family story, right? And then after that, we sort of pick up in the beginning of Shemot. The name Shemot for the second book, Elah Shemot, is the list of names of the people who came down into Egypt and then stayed there. And so what happens is, in Joseph's time, they stay down there because things are better, right? They have food.
Right.
There's no famine. He's the viceroy. They're all treated well. And then what happens at the beginning of Exodus is a new pharaoh comes into town who doesn't remember all the good things that Joseph did. And then the rest of the story, as they say, is history, right? Yored Mitzrayim.
But don't they all go back? Didn't they all leave Egypt and go back to Canaan? Because that's where Jacob.
Yeah, so there is what happens at the end of the Torah, which we'll read next week, is they bring first, right? Jacob comes down, and then they bring Jacob's bones, and then they eventually bring Joseph's bones back to bury up where the family burial plots are. And our cemetery expert here understands, all the complexities of this. Sue, you had a question.
In opera, as in literature, it's always the denouement.
Ah,
What?
denouement, which would be translated into. I only know that in context. What does it actually mean in French?
Well, it's what it means.
Yeah, no, okay, we'll look this.
We're very
Sue would
graphic.
know that opera question.
Well, no, that's why I asked her, and she said a denouement. So French was never my other than ordering a baguette. I think that was the extent I got. Okay, so anyway, so back to our questions, right? So why does he mention, right, asking whether his dad is alive if he clearly should know it? And then why does he say my father as opposed to saying our father, right? If he's revealed himself as a brother, why is he now saying, right, is my father alive instead of saying, why is our father? Okay, so.
Didn't feel a part of.
So and again, there are many potential answers to this, and oddly enough, as I said, it took a lot of work just to find anybody who actually was interested in the question. And so Professor Hertzberg actually sort of anticipated it, and he does a much better job than I probably would have in explaining a little bit of it. So he says, in the JPS translation, which is generally what we're dealing with, okay, the translation deals with the first question by taking the liberty of eschewing the literal meaning. As I said, in the Hebrew, it does not add this little parenthetical. Right? It's not a question of really or still alive. It just says, Ha'od avichai, is my father still alive? Or is my father alive? Not even still. Is my father alive? Okay, so he answers the first question by eschewing the literal meaning used in the old JPS translation, and most others, including those of Robert Alter, Everett Fox, and Friedman. It dubiously renders the phrase, is my father still well? Instead of, is my father still alive? So that's not really our translation, but if you were to look in the Hertz Chumash, that's what you would see. So he then says, let's examine the commentary of the Kli Yakar, who is Shlomo Ephraim ben Aaron Lundschutz, lived in the 16th century, early 17th century in Prague. And it preserves the literal translation and provides the following two explanations addressing each of the questions. So the Kli Yakar addressing our first question of why Joseph asked if his father was alive. Even though they, being the brothers, already told him that their father was still alive, as was understood from all of Joseph's words, nevertheless, Joseph thought that perhaps they spoke thus, so that he would take pity on the old man and not cause his death, since his soul is bound up with Benjamin's soul. And therefore he asked once again, is my father still alive? Friedman nicely captures the essence of the Kli Yakar's comment in his commentary on the Torah and says, for all he knows, his brothers were lying to him as the Egyptian official. But now he asks them, tell me as your brother Joseph, is he really still alive? So in other words, in Joseph's mind, right, he's still playing the part up until this point. They only know him as the viceroy of Egypt. They are concerned about him. And so he then, in his heart, he thinks, well, given that circumstance, given they didn't know who I was, perhaps they were talking about this guy as still being alive as an excuse to be able to get Benjamin to come back with them. Right? They create a fictional story that says their father's going to die if their beloved son doesn't come back. But we don't know whether, in fact, they're telling the truth. And they have a history, let's just say, of being less than, forthcoming. So in Joseph's mind, speaking again with the veil still down, with them not knowing who he is, he needs to clarify, now that he's revealed himself as the brother, he needs to ask the question again as a brother to see whether in fact they were actually telling the truth. So it says basically in Joseph's mind, he's still playing something of a game, right? There's a dance going on here, right? This is again sort of classic theater in which we, the viewers, know the whole picture, and the players on the court itself, right, don't really have any sense of what's going on. Oh, great. Good Shabbos. Don't be sorry. Great to see you.
I'll try to convince them better late than never.
Of course it's better late than never. What are you talking? There is no such thing as late. And not in this show at least. You know, there is potentially early, but I doubt there is late. So good. This is a good, David is our expert in figuring out conundrums, so this is good timing. Okay, so here we have basically one scenario in which we're unsure, right? Joseph is, let's just say, cautious, and he wants for clarification. So he, in the end, decides that he's going to ask a second time. Now is the brother, and he's going to ask.
I have a different take.
Good. Please, let's give the different take.
I have a take that he is so removed from the family at this stage, 22 years later. He personalizes this thing.
That's good.
As opposed to us.
Right. Okay, so you're already on to question 2. So this is very good, right? The question of why does he refer to my father instead of saying our father? So it's a good point, right? Here, he's been so out of the mix, as Howard says. He hasn't been a part of the family for 22 years. He doesn't, right? The semantics may not seem, so important, but the truth is they're actually very important. It's an indication of what he's feeling inside is how it manifests on the outside. And you'll see this in a second. So did you have something?
I was just going to say that sometimes you find the meaning of denouement climax, and it's not.
It's not, right?
And in French, it's the tying up. So, denouement is the resolution of the conflict.
Very good. So this would be actually then, either it is in fact the climax of the story, or it is that. But see, we're learning so many things this morning. This is
Tying
great.
up the resolution of the complicated.
I love that. Okay, now I finally know what it means. Thank you, Sue. That's great. Okay, so now we get to our second question, which Howard already gave us a good answer for, and we're not far off from what the Kliyakar is saying, but you'll hear actually that it's again sort of the brothers don't exactly get painted in the best light. So what does the Kliyakar say? It says, but they, the brothers, didn't understand it in this way, and thought instead that he, being Joseph, didn't intend to ask if he were alive or not, but rather to remind them of their sin. All right, this is the reason why he says, my father, not our father. What does he mean? Is my father alive, meaning that he's my father and not your father, because you did not take pity on his suffering, as if he were not your father. Okay, what does he mean by that? They were therefore terrified and unable to utter a word in response. In other words, the brothers see this as, oh my goodness, right? This is our brother Joseph. He says it in this way, right? He says, my father, not yours, because you have lost the ability to consider him as your father, because you put him through this whole mess. You threw me in a pit. You made him think that I was dead. You don't deserve to call him your father. Right? But I am his son. I never lost being his son. I was the victim, and you guys were the terrorizers. So, in other words, says Hertzberg, according to Kliyakar, the brothers interpreted Joseph's words differently than he intended them. Okay, so it's not a question of what Joseph was thinking. It's a question of what were the brothers thinking in response. So Joseph didn't mean it this way, according to Kliyakar. And instead, what it is the brothers psychologically responding, anticipating or assuming the mindset of Joseph as he's speaking to them, and they become terrified, because if he's reminding them of this original sin, what do we think is the next thing that Joseph's likely to do? Right? And he very much has all the power in this moment. Okay, the brothers are powerless, and Joseph is basically the most powerful person in the world in that moment. So, we can give them a little bit of credit to think that their lives may in fact be on the line. Okay, so in other words, according to the Kliyakar, the brothers interpreted Joseph's words differently than he intended them, and not surprisingly, the Kliyakar provides us with a psychologically nuanced interpretation. The two comments are actually one, two sides of the same coin. Kliyakar's first comment interprets Joseph's words from Joseph's own perspective as the speaker. Joseph thought, quote unquote, that perhaps his brothers were lying. On the other hand, Kliyakar's second comment interprets Joseph's words from the brothers' perspective as the listeners. The brothers, quote unquote, thought that Joseph was reminding them of their past misdeeds by emphasizing the words, my father, when in essence, that was not Joseph's intention at all. Okay? He's driving to an ultimate point. The brothers interpreted Joseph's words based on their own feelings of guilt and were therefore rendered speechless as the verse concludes. Kliakar thereby highlights a most valuable technique of close reading of the Torah and of everyday life. A speaker's intended meaning and a listener's understanding of those same words are often very different indeed. Okay? So he continues, and we'll give him the full credit because it's really his drash this morning that I thought was so great. The lesson is perhaps twofold. When speaking, one must weigh one's words very carefully, considering the sensibilities of the listener, especially when faced with an issue of great import or an emotionally charged situation. On the other hand, the listener must be acutely aware that his or her own concerns may be influencing his or her perception, and must therefore attempt to consider more than one possible understanding of the speaker's words before responding or not. So this is really quite a remarkable and very applicable teaching, I think, to everyone in all times. Okay, the nature of being the speaker and being the listener, especially in situations in which we have reached a denouement or a climax, right, in which a conflict has reached this point. And so when people are finally speaking directly and plainly, we still are translating it in our own minds based upon our own assumptions of whatever it is the conversation is about. And I've had this experience many times, right? And I've been on the other side of this experience many times in which something that I meant or intended to say was read very differently, not because the person wasn't listening to me, right? Wasn't paying attention to the details, but simply because that person had a filter. And they were filtering my words entirely through their own experience, either with me or with other circumstances or whatever it might be. So here we are engaged in a conversation, and the speaker is speaking and the listener is listening, and nobody actually has any intention to further conflict. But conflict nonetheless continues because of the perceptions both of the speaker and of the listener that are going on, in many cases subconsciously, but certainly at a lower level of consciousness that one isn't even aware of until after the fact, right? Until you can process it and lay it out on a piece of paper like this. So the challenge, of course, is, like I said, we're the viewers, like watching on a television screen or in the theater and watching the players play it out. We know what's going on. They have no idea, right? They're living it in real life experience. And more often than not, we're the ones on the stage, not the ones in the seats. It's very hard in real time to be able to compute on this level, to be asking ourselves the question, is my response, or am I thinking about the way this person is speaking to me, is it about me and my perception, or is it actually what they're intending to say? And it's not a simple calculus, right? Most of us really struggle with this probably on a daily basis, certainly many times in our lives in significant kinds of ways, and almost always these kind of occur with the people that you spend the most time with, that you have the longest history with. Because if you're just talking to somebody you just met, you might have some preconceived notions or biases that cause you to think differently. But more often than not, it's about 20, 30, 40 years of history in a married life. It's about friendships, right? Or, brothers sitting next to each other, father and son, right? All of us are in these kinds of relationships. Wife, perhaps, right? In these moments, and I'm thinking actually, because I was talking to David about this world chess stuff going on, right? Chess is all in the mind, right? You're always trying to sort of anticipate, is he really doing that? Or is he doing that so that I'll think that he's doing that, and then I'm going to do this in response to that? Right? That is, in essence, right, most of our conversations are, in fact, this kind of chess game. And so I think that if we could take something away from the Kliakar's original teaching and Professor Hertzberg's additional commentary, and from just even paying attention to that one little phrase that you otherwise could read 100 times and not even think about, this is a good lesson for us that perhaps it's probably easier on the listening side of things to begin with, right? Is to sort of say, the next time I'm in a circumstance where there's at least a little bit of being unsure, give ourselves that extra second to say, is this really what they're intending to say to me, right? They may not be saying it in the best way. They may not be saying it correctly or nicely, but do they really mean to say it, right? Am I perhaps assuming this because of a past history or because of a bias or whatever it might be? And look, it doesn't mean that it's going to be successful every time, but I feel like if we have 100 conversations like this in a lifetime, and even one of them we're able to change the paradigm by stopping it from getting to the point in which it sort of snowballs from there and gets worse and worse, it could be one of the greatest teachings that I've ever come across. I mean, it really is that powerful. All right, so I saw a hand, and then I think we'll go to Hal.
in the course of the pandemic, from what I've heard from many people and from colleagues as well, the precariousness grows exponentially with text messages.
You're right. You are absolutely correct. You are absolutely, this is with text messages. And the truth is that can be extended also to email, right? And this was actually, and still is probably one of the great challenges. One of the reasons why, by the way, if you ever get emails from me and they are full of exclamation points, okay, and I realize that grammatically speaking, they are being used incorrectly in almost every circumstance. It is not because I'm an overly hyperbolic person, but it's because I would rather err on the side of somebody thinking that I'm smiling while saying it. And that's other than putting a smiley face, which I think, in the professional world probably, Alex, when you're sending an email to somebody, I don't imagine you can put a smiley face at the end of it and they'll take you seriously, right? But that's the logic of it precisely because of that issue. Right? I can't even think about it. Luckily, I started dating Lou where text messaging was still kind of new. I can't even imagine the world of trying to date somebody where main communication is via text. Because you have no idea where your standing is, right? If somebody puts a period at the end of a sentence in a text, many generations worth of people, right? Like David's generation and that general will look at that as a emphatic, right? As a negative emphatic, basically saying like, this is it. I'll see you later, period. Okay, and that is absolutely very apt, Sue. I didn't even think about going that direction, but very apt.
This is too Talmudic.
Nothing. This group, come on, you love Talmudic.
And the I think the text message thing even before the pandemic, and the other thing is people make so many more typos than they used to.
Yes, that is also correct.
And so you could be interpreting something
Because your fingers don't.
that they didn't even intend to write.
Right. And that's a big one. And I've given, actually, speaking of Talmudic, right, that I gave that example several weeks ago about a translation exercise that I had in school in which I mistranslated one of the first most important words of the whole sugya at the beginning. And therefore my entire understanding of that Talmudic sugya was completely off because I had misunderstood what it was intended to say. I translated it literally, and it was part of a euphemistic phrase. And I would have had no way of knowing that without the resource. And so I spent, hours, and my teacher was just like one big, but you're absolutely correct, right? Like one unintended word. And in the legal profession, I can imagine there's a reason why proofreading is very important. And we live in an era where proofreading has become a secondary consideration, if at all, largely because if you have 100 emails you have to respond to, right? You have to respond to them, and you do it as quickly as you can, not with necessarily the kind of...
Tiny little keyboard.
I proofread
My niece calls mine
weekly
because
things
I have so many.
because
Yeah.
they didn't take out the Hanukkah.
Yeah, well, no, so that's the thing, right? So Eileen sends every week to several of us to proofread, and I, every time I'll catch one thing and I'll miss 5, and it's... I know my skill set in proofreading was never it. I'm just very thankful that I lived in an era of Microsoft Word and not a typewriter. Okay, I probably would be a street sweeper if I had lived in an era before computers.
I bet I'm the only one that spotted it, though.
Well, no, you'd be surprised. But it's But Howard, do you have something else you wanted to add, or you were just saying it was too Talmudic?
I use like an automated grammar checker because that works a lot.
Grammarly is quite good.
Yeah. I use if I'm writing a paper for school, I have to use it.
I have a hard time believing though that you would ever make any kind of grammar mistake.
Bunch of grammar.
But the truth is, Grammarly is great because it also teaches you as you're doing it, right? Like most people, I could not tell you the laws of proper use of comma other than the fact that I've read enough, over my lifetime that I know the pattern of it and therefore I use it. But I guarantee you, you read my stuff, there are probably 15 things.
If you're not sure, put a comma.
I'm pretty sure it says Howard's grammar. I think it's good. As a last, sort of anecdotal word, one of my professors who is a known curmudgeon, and he would actually insist that all rabbinical students take an exam based on, I think it's Strunk and White, the Elements of Style, I think is what it's called. And we had to read the book and take an exam and pass the exam, otherwise we would flunk his class before we even got to the Torah. And, and of course everybody's up in arms over it, and I realized after the fact, this guy is a genius, right? Because here we are, people are supposed to go out into the world whose main job is to interpret and deal in, written form, and we're going to walk around not having any concept of how to actually properly communicate with people in a way that doesn't seem embarrassing. So he was right on about it. And as one last word, I almost failed that exam, not because I wasn't prepared, but because I cheaply bought the earlier edition before it was Strunk and White. It was just Strunk. And so I bought that, and apparently White added several things after the fact. So I got like a 76 and just barely eked by. So, thank God for that. Otherwise, I would not be your rabbi. But all that. Thank you guys. This is a good conversation for the morning. This is one of the great things about having actual people in the room. Otherwise, very tough. And David, Alex, great to have you as additions as well. Good. No, no sorries. If you come for 5 minutes, you come for 5 minutes. It makes the rabbi very happy. All right, so we're now back into our prayer books. Page 362, we'll begin Seder Kriyat HaTorah. And just so everyone knows, I'll give you the page numbers in a minute. Okay, 362, Torah is in body or spirit. Ein kamocha Elohim Adonai v'ein kema'asecha malchutcha malchut kol olamim u'memshaltecha bechol dor v'hador Adonai melech Adonai malach Adonai imloch le'olam va'ed Adonai oz lemo yitein Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom Abba harachamim heitiva berzoncha et Zion tivnei chomot Yerushalayim ki becha levad batachnu melech el ram v'nisa Adon olamim ki mitzion tetzei Torah Ki mitzion tetzei Torah udevar Adonai mi Yerushalayim Baruch shenatan Torah Baruch shenatan Torah le'amo Yisrael b'kedushato Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad
Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo
Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo
Kalul Adonai Tioner B'ma Shemo Yachtav Lecha Adonai HaGedula VeHaGevura VeHaTiferet MeHaNetzach VeHaHod Ki Chol B'Shamayim U'Ba'aretz Ki Chol B'Shamayim U'Ba'aretz Lecha Adonai HaMamlacha Ve'amit Na'aseh Lechol Erosh Romemu Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachavu Lehar Kodsho Romemu Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachavu Lehar Kodsho. Good. Griezmann, you'll help us out with the blessings. Do you have them in front of you, or do you want the big old card thing here?
What page we're on? I'm sorry.
No problem. It's 3.
I'll take the big.
Yeah, big one's good. Are you a Baruch S or a Baruch
S.
Okay, so if you want, I don't think you need the transliteration, but it's on the other side.
All right.
Believe it or not, it flips over, which is good. All right.
It's Ashkenazi.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So Yamod. First of all, Alex, what's your Hebrew name?
Elkanah ben Dov.
Elkanah ben Dov. I'm trying to remember. Dov ben Elkanah, I think, right? Lehaliyah harishona. Okay, whenever you're ready.
Baruch Hu es Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai Havarach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher b'chavanu mikol ha'amim, v'nasan lanu es toraso. Baruch atah Adonai Yosein HaTorah.
Amen. V'haya kiroto hien hanar v'met. Vehoridu avdecha et shevet avdecha vinu veyagon she'olam ki avdecha arav et hana'ar me'im avi lemor im lo avienu Elecha v'chatati lavi kol hayamim. I realized I forgot to tell you. We started with verse 31 of chapter 44, so we're now in verse 33. So it should just be the next page again.
488.
Very good. So again, chapter 44, verse 33. Sorry about that. All right.
Top of 288.
Isn't it amazing though? This is like I can see what's going on while looking down. Ve'ata yeshev na'avdecha tachat ha'na'ar eved la'adoni ve'hana'ar ya'al im echav ki ech el avi ve'hana'ar einenu iti Pen evara asher imtza et avim velo yechol Yosef leitapek lechol hanitzavim alav vayikra hotziu chol ish me'alai Velo amad ish ito behitvada Yosef el echav
Number 2.
vayiten et kolo bibchim vayishmeu Mitzrayim vayishma bet paro Vayomer Yosef el echav ani Yosef ha'od avi chai velo yachalu echav lanot oto ki nivhalu mipanav Vayomer Yosef el echav Geshuna elai vayigashu. Vayigashu. Just make sure. Vayomer ani Yosef achichem asher machartem oti Mitzrayma ve'ata al te'atzevu Ve'al yichar beinechem ki machartem oti hena ki lemichye shalachani Elohim lifnechem ki zeh shenatayim harav bekerev haaretz ve'hod chamesh shanim asher ein charish ve'katzir Vayishlacheni Elohim lifnechem lasum lachem sherit ba'aretz ulachayot lachem lifleta gedola.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher nasa lanu Toras emes v'chayei olam
Top is okay.
et v'tzochenu baruch atah Adonai nosein haTorah.
Amen. Yashikov, guys, that's great. You have a standing invitation anytime. It's great. It's just great. Trust me, nothing makes a rabbi happier than see one of his students come to shul and do an aliyah. I mean, really, it's the definition of, extra bonus points. Okay, so we're going to now turn to page 371 to offer our Misha Berach this morning. Misha Berach Avotenu ve'imotenu Avraham Yitzchak ve'Yaakov Sarah Rivka Rachel v'Leah Hu Yivarech et hacholim ha'elu. And we'll begin this morning by thinking of those in our community and connected to our community who are in need of healing. Ellen Frank, Bensi Tepper, Cecilia Hirsch, Glenn Tinney, Tzipora Ahava, Gittel Bat Shmuel ve'Aviva, Ora Nachum, Bruce Steger, Chana Ruth Bat Sarah, Jeff Baker, David Tosher, Jim Cohn, Monique Renee Banks Rathbun, Lindsay Epstein, Dolores Michka, Sylvia Oren, Yerachmiel Ben Hinda, Paloma Chauhan, Samuel Moskowitz, Chaim Leib, Joyce Weinberg, Rick Gold, Stu Pollack, Jane London, Catherine Guarina, Emunah Chava, Judy Stern, Miriam Kornfeld, Raz Brody, Chana Ruth Bat Sarah, Vegel Tzipora bat Elisheva bat Sarah, Richard Gambino, Michelle Sawicki, Idle Basha bat Yitzchak, Tzvi Menachem ben Chaim, Rivka bat Devora, Amy and Gavin Tucker, Janice Kurz, David Dowling, Israel ben Yitzchak, Lorraine Danis, Buddy Kossoff, Shelley Newmark, David Kyle Klotman, Rivka bat Rachel, Sarah bat Chana, Moshe Eliezer ben Sivia, Peretz ben Yehuda, Leah bat Naomi, Gedalia ben Leah, Justin Banner, Tzipora Ahava bat Yehudit Rachel, Jane Beard Cass, Amy Cass, Steve Levine, Ira Madras, Ephraim Raphael ben Esther, and Myra Maslin. If any of our friends here would like to add additional names, Marsha, we'll start with you, and then we can work our way around. Oh, and Dina Bat Chana. I forgot to add Dina Bat Chana. And certainly for those that are watching at home, you may add names as well. Marsha, you need a second? We can go to the...
Ed Keenan, Joe Daly, Diane Schwartz, Mary Moore, Paul Concio, Evan Dunn Stapleton, Jane Cass, Leah Burren, Brian Hooker.
You got it.
Muriel Hirsch, Gloria Tower Dash, Joan Howard.
Eddie Glicksman, Karen Layton.
HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yimalei Rachamim Alehem Lahachalimam L'Rabotam L'Chazikam V'Yishlach Lahem Mehira Refuah Shlema Min HaShamayim Refuat HaNefesh Refuat HaGuf Hashtaba Galav Zman Kariv V'Namar Amen. May the one who blessed our ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, bless and heal those who are suffering. May the Blessed Holy One be filled with compassion for their health to be restored and their strength to be revived. And God swiftly send them a complete renewal of body and spirit, and let us say together, Amen. El na refana la, el na refana la, el na refana la, refuah shelema. El na refana lo, el na refana lo, el na refana lo, refuah shelema. Now rise in body or spirit as we lift and dress the Torah on the bottom of page 370. Vezot HaTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai biyad Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Okay, please be seated. This morning's Haftarah comes from the prophet Ezekiel, if memory serves correctly. Chumash is already on it, page 302. If you have a plowed Chumash, you're following at home, you would be looking for the prophet Ezekiel, the book of Ezekiel, chapter 37, verses 15 to 28. Again, 37, 15 to 28 of the prophet Ezekiel. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nbiim tovim v'ratza v'divrehem hanemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'torah u'Moshe avdo v'Yisrael amo v'nvi'eh ha'emet v'tzedek. Vayehi devar Adonai Eli lemor. The word of the Eternal came to me, saying, Mortal, take a stick and write on it for Judah and Israelites associated with it, and take another stick and write on it Joseph's, Ephraim's stick, and all the house of Israel associated with it. Bring them together, every one of them as one, that they may be as one in your hand. And when any of your people say to you, Will you not tell us what you mean by what you are doing? Say to them, Thus says the Eternal God, Behold, I am taking the stick of Yosef, which is in the hand of Ephraim and the tribes of Israel associated with it, and placing them on him, along with the stick of Judah, making them one, so they become a single stick in my hand. Before their eyes, hold in your hand the sticks on which you have written, and tell them, Thus says the Eternal God, Behold, I am about to take the people of Israel from the nations where they went. I will gather them from all around and bring them back to their soil. And there on the hills of Israel I will make them into a single nation in the land, with a single king to rule them. And never again shall they be divided as two nations, never again shall they be two kingdoms. Never again shall they defile themselves with their idols and with their abominable images and with their other transgressions. I will save them from all their backslidings wherein they have sinned, and I will purify them, and then they shall be my people, and I will be their God. My servant David shall rule them, and they shall all have one shepherd. They shall follow my ordinances and faithfully keep my laws. They shall live in the land that I gave to my servant Jacob, the land of your ancestors, and they, their children, and their children's children shall live there forever, and my servant David shall be their head forever. I will make a covenant of peace with them, an everlasting covenant with them. I will make them safe and increase their numbers and place my sanctuary in their midst forever. My presence will be with them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And when my sanctuary remains among them forever, the nations shall know that I am the Eternal, who sanctifies Israel. And now back in our prayer books, page 372. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, sur kol haolamim, tzadik bechol hadorot, האל הנאמן, האומר ועושה, המדבר ומקיים, שכל דבריו אמת וצדק, על התורה ועל העבודה ועל ימים ועל יום השבת הזה, שנתת לנו, אדוני אלוהינו, לקדושה ולמנוחה, לכבוד ולתפארת. על הכל, אדוני אלוהינו, אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך, נברך שמך בפי כל חי, תמיד לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, נקדש השבת. Amen. We'll now rise in body or spirit as we turn to page 376 to offer a prayer for our country at the bottom of the page. O guardian of life and liberty, may our nation always merit your protection. Teach us to give thanks for what we have by sharing it with those who are in need. Keep our eyes open to the wonders of creation and alert to the care of the earth. May we never be lazy in the work of peace, and may we honor those who have died in defense of our ideals. Grant our leaders wisdom and forbearance. May they govern with justice and compassion. Help us all to appreciate one another and to respect the many ways that we may serve you. May our homes be safe from affliction and strife, and our country be sound in body and spirit. Amen. A prayer for the state of Israel, page 377. Avinu Shabbat Shamayim Tzur Yisrael v'goalo, barech et medinat Yisrael, reishit tzmichat geulatenu. Hagen alea be'evrat chastecha, ufros alea sukat shlomecha. Ushlach orcha ba'amitcha l'rasheha, sareha v'yoatzeha. V'takdem be'etzah tova milfanecha, v'natata shalom ba'aretz, v'simchat olam liyoshveha, v'nomar. Amen. O Heavenly One, Protector and Redeemer of Israel, bless the state of Israel, which marks the dawning of hope for all who seek peace. Shield it beneath the wings of your love, spread over the canopy of your peace. Send your light and truth to all who lead and advise, guiding them with your good counsel. Establish peace in the land and fullness of joy for all who dwell there. Amen. We'll remain standing as we turn back to page 374 as we conclude the Torah service. Yehalelu et Shem Adonai, ki niskav shemo levado, olu al eretz v'shamayim v'yarem keren liyamo, tehila lechol chasidav, livnei Yisrael am kerovo. Alleluia, alleluia. Ki lekach tov natati lachem, torati al tazovu. Et chaim ehi lamachazikim ba, letomcheha meushar deracheha, darchei noam v'chol netivoteha, shalom. Hashivenu Adonai Elecha ben Hashuva, Kadesh, Kadesh Yameinu, Kadesh Yameinu Kekedem. Remain standing as we turn to page 586 at the very bottom of the page. Aleinu l'shabech. עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שמנו חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. Ask those in mourning, those observing yahrzeit to please remain standing. Everyone else may be seated. We begin by thinking of those who passed in our community in recent months. Dr. John Aberkin, Sylvia Alderman, Morris Dickstein, Linda Danath, Sandra Furman, Evelyn Gelb, Arthur Grossman, Elaine Grossman, Gerald Hirsch, Deirdre Klein, Jeanette Kopp, Howie Lippman, Audrey Lubo, Morty Lynn, Jerry Monroe, Harry Olstein, Geraldine Rosen, Harriet Roth, Jeannie Rubin, Howard Schreier, Dorothy Shupnick, Paul Silver, Marlise Silverberg, Blanche Sklar, Rita Sandra Snyder, Joan Strong Tangzilius, and Virginia Tizer. We also mark the yahrzeits that occurred during the last week for Samuel Aberkin, Dr. Joseph Berkeley, Gertrude Blank, Lillian Farber, Louis Feinstein, Erwin Godinsky, Melvin Gelb, Philip Heller, Frida Siblowitz-Hertz, Charles Hipsch, Arthur Kaplan, Helen Kropp, Max Lewontin, Edward Massoff, Harlan Noddle, Elizabeth Pence, Harry Shockett, Louis Schwab, Josephine Schwartz, Ralph Spinner, Arthur Spitz, Daniel Tatkan, and Sophie Zauber. Anybody else here saying Kaddish for anybody that we didn't mention?
Nice to meet you. I'll stimulate.
Invite those at home watching, if there are any names we didn't mention, you can mention your loved ones' names aloud, and we will rise in body or spirit as the mourners join together with me on page 598. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, be'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, v'agalav v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shemei rabbah mevarach le'alam le'almei almayim. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kudsha b'richu. Le'ila min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shalom rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Zichronam livracha, may every one of their memories be for a blessing. Okay, please be seated, everybody. Good Shabbos. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. So just a few quick announcements. Please do join us for Torah study beginning at 12 o'clock on Zoom. So you got time, you can get home, get yourself settled, come on and learn alongside me and a bunch of other really brilliant Torah scholars. So again, Zoom, 12 o'clock. Noting also the Social Justice Committee's 8 nights of social justice giving doesn't end just because Hanukkah's over. There is another drop-off Sunday, December 12th. That would be tomorrow. All items that are being requested here at the Whalers Church, 1 to 3 p.m. I think if the weather is good, look for them. They'll be in the front parking lot. And I think Shelley and a few of our teens are going to be there to take whatever we still have to give, which is always appreciated. Also, Monday, Niddah Mitzvah will be meeting at 11:30. Hebrew School is at 3:30. Social Justice Committee has its virtual meeting at 5. Our fairly newly formed Anti-Semitism Committee will be meeting online again Tuesday at 6 o'clock. My regular class on Wednesday is at noon on Heschel and his book on the prophets. 3:30 the teen group is meeting, and then 3:30 at the Hebrew School, and then teen group has its meeting at 6 o'clock here at the Whalers Church downstairs. So David, you got nothing going on Wednesday? You want to come by 6 o'clock? No pressure. No pressure at all. Okay, also Wednesday, 6 o'clock, virtual tour of the Jewish Museum of New York's exhibit Afterlives, Recovering the Lost Stories of Looted Art. And then this Thursday, our Anti-Semitism Committee, working in partnership with the American Jewish Committee and the East End Jewish Community Council, has arranged for a Zoom session titled Anti-Semitism in America, Perspectives from Gen Z. So Gen Z, just to define that, I'm still not entirely sure, but think along the lines of, our younger people from, David's age through those that have just started college through just ending college. And in particular, these days, a lot of what we were talking about before about challenges of digital communication, right? A lot of what is being experienced, a lot of the vitriol is most acutely felt by our young people, especially in the online space, in which there is basically, no attempt for anybody to even, modestly moderate one's feelings or comments, let alone use facts or data or historical information or anything of the sort. It really is just a morass. And so it's something actually very important for us to hear, those that are not of the generation and those of the generation, to hear sort of what their perspectives are and what's going on. So again, that's 7 o'clock. It's open to anybody, but does require pre-registration to get onto the Zoom. So that's Thursday at 7. My Friday class will begin at 9:15. 4 o'clock is our weekly Shabbat Together program for kids under the age of 5 at Old Whalers. And also a heads up that a week from Sunday, December 19th at 7, will be a virtual book talk with our veteran journalist and our member, Carl Grossman, on his new book, Cold War, Long Island. So this actually might be a very fascinating book for you.
When is that, Rabbi?
That is December 19th, 7 o'clock, a virtual thing. This would be one worth, because Carl's been writing about, in particular, matters related to the Cold War and related to nuclear proliferation, Star Wars, not the movie Star Wars, but the space-based lasers and missiles, maybe, those kinds of things. So Carl's really, everything he does is tremendously well-researched. And I believe that our co-president Ron is interviewing him, so that should be very nice. Otherwise, check your e-blasts, notice typos, let us know when they do occur. And one last word, which we did a pilot of something last night, which I'm told went reasonably well.
I thought it went really well. Her computer froze. That's what happened.
Yeah, well, no, so I realized that Shelley's computer is not the one to do it from, but you guys were watching the actual stream in the Zoom, right?
Exactly.
So the idea of this is that when we shifted back to being in person and sort of hybrid, that when people are watching the service on Friday nights, they're doing it in a silo, right? They're just watching it in their home. They're not connected to anybody else. They're not on a Zoom. So what this does is it allows anybody who wants to, if you still want to just watch it on your couch by yourself or with your family, that still will work. Website, YouTube, Facebook, all those things will work. But anybody who's a member of the congregation who would like to have something a little bit more interactive can go on a Zoom, and in that Zoom will be all your buddies. You'll see their faces. You can chat with them. And then there will be the stream of the service will be pumped through that Zoom as well. We'll just work on getting it to be of a higher quality. So we tried it last week. It seemed to have worked for the few people we tried it with. So I think either this week or the next we'll roll it out to everybody else, and we'll see how it goes.
Sounds good to me.
Constantly trying, Howard, when you're down in Florida.
We go out and come back in. That's what we do. We went out and came back in. That made it illegal.
Well, so she needs a new laptop because hers is slowly dying on her. So that also is part of it. So what I'll do probably is I'll start the Zoom from here and run that from my office because we have very good internet and a much better computer. And that will make a big difference.
And then make her co-host.
And then make you guys the hosts and you can manage all that stuff. Anyway, any other announcements? Oh, good. This is great. This is great to see all you guys.
There's a band concert tonight.
Right, I was going to say. So there's a band concert here. And it's at what time?
It's I think it's a part Harbor Bells, part something else. I think there's a whole bunch of.
Oh, so that's what the bells are.
Yeah.
This now answers, like, I end up in the rafters plenty of times because I have to set up all the streaming equipment each week. And I noticed there were all these.
Well, there's a holiday, the church does a concert
With
with
the-
bells.
How
Oh,
cool.
that's for decades,
Oh, no,
right?
no, no.
Right.
It's a beautiful thing.
So last week they had a service here for this Linda Rice.
Yeah, right.
It
No.
was absolutely beautiful, and they started with the bells, and I didn't understand why until I found out that she was a member of the Bells.
Oh, that's.
And then on Sunday, St. Andrews had the Harbor Bells along with East Hampton's Harbor Bells, and they dedicated that whole concert to Linda as well.
No,
It was very beautiful.
It's a very sweet thing to be able to do. Okay, so we're going to conclude our service, page 626, in Kelohenu, and then we'll do Kiddush. En Kelohenu, en Kadonenu, en Kemalkenu, en Kemoshienu, Micheloenu, Michadonenu, Michemalkenu, Michemoshienu, Nodel Eloheinu, Nodel Adonenu, Nodel Malkeinu, Nodel Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshiachenu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshiachenu. Okay, we turn to page 604 and we'll rise in body or spirit for Kiddush. Veshamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Beini uvein b'nei Yisrael oti leolam Veshamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Na'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim v'et ha'aretz v'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Na'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Uvayom hashvi Shabbat vayinafash, Shabbat vayinafash, Shabbat vayinafash, v'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat, ledorotam berit olam. Al ken berach Adonai yom ha-Shabbat vayikadshehu savri. L'chaim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam b'horei peri hagafen. Amen.
So, I want to see like a history here because these names are all getting pretty confusing here because
Good job is to all of our friends.
a couple pages later it says Jacob Nimrod